Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and welcome to a very sunny paddock here at Zandvoort Circuit in the Netherlands, and I'm pretty happy to be able to say that, I have to say, because I've been sheltering under an umbrella for most of the weekend. We've had some torrential rain over the last couple of days, and now that qualifying is finished, we've got sunshine. Who would have thought it? We have just watched the qualifying session. Max Verstappen, the home hero, taking pole position in front of his home crowd. A mighty pole at that, 6/10 clear of his nearest rival, Lando Norris in the McLaren. And it was George Russell in the Mercedes completing the top three. I am Rosanna Tennant, and joining me in the Alpine hospitality area. We've really moved up in the world, guys, really. I mean, just let's get that out there. Our lead commentator, Harry Benjamin, and former W Series driver, Alice Powell. Good afternoon. First of all, what plush surroundings. You've got a cup of tea there, Alice. We've got biscuits. I mean, this is living.
It is. We're in their little sort of conference room just to the side. We've got a plethora of biscuits in front of us, fresh water, tea, coffee.
Fresh flowers.
Fresh flowers. I'm not sure they're that fresh looking at them. They look a little bit fake. But either way.
They're not fake.
Are they not?
We've got some beautiful Lysianthus, Hypericum. There you go. That's all for free.
And this is Gardening Live with Rosanna Tennant. No, but it's actually quite a cool place to be because you look out and there's some good names in here. We've got Mick Schumacher over here talking to Jack Doohan, and his father, the motorcycle champion Mick Doohan, is also here. Ocon ran upstairs a few moments ago. I think Victor Martins, the F3 champion from last year and current F2 drivers, just waltzed on in as well. So there's lots of little discussions going on in here as well. It's very intriguing to see.
And that's if you look inside the hospitality area. If you look outside, we've got glorious windows allowing us a little look into what's going on in the F1 paddock. Because, Alice, after qualifying's kind of done and dusted, there's still a lot of work that's going on, isn't there?
Yeah, there's still a lot of commitments. I think some of the drivers have hopped over to the fan zone to see the fans and chucked some caps out to those that have waited for the drivers to come over. And then, of course, the drivers have got to go and continue their debriefs. They will sit and chat with their engineers as well. They'll have dinner. They might get a massage and get some physio treatment, a physical circuit, and a long Grand Prix coming up tomorrow. And then eventually they will probably head back to the circuit back to their hotels anywhere between sort of 7, 8 o'clock at night.
I might stick around if there are some physio sessions.
Well, I think I will as well. Pierre Gasly just walked in with a massive bag of Stroop waffles. So that's his
dinner.
That's his post quali recovery, I think there. So even an athlete can have some Stroop waffles.
Do you know what? I reckon that's a present from a fan. I'm trying to stay on the topic of qualifying, but I have to say, Abby Pulling, the Alpine Academy driver and F1 Academy driver's hot chocolate is drifting up my nose, and it's going to be very hungry for supper later on. So, Abby, great to have you watching alongside, just seeing how, the magic of broadcasting.
Yeah, no, I'm here with my hot chocolate. Sorry, it's gassing you out.
I'm enjoying every sniff. Right, back to qualifying. Max Verstappen on pole position yet again, and for the third time here in the Netherlands in front of his home crowd. I don't know about you guys up in the commentary box, but in the pit lane, every time he went out over the course of not just today, but yesterday during the practice sessions, the crowd were on their feet, whether that was wearing a poncho or underneath an umbrella, hands in the air, cheering for him. My goodness me, he's got the crowd on his side this weekend. Not that he even needed that extra little bit of horsepower.
No, absolutely. Through the wind and the rain that qualifying started in, and even in FP3, and right from the start of the day, the grandstand and our commentary box is on the main straight, and opposite us is that main grandstand. Absolutely packed out, and in between the sessions, when even there's no cars on track, they're dancing away, they're getting the Mexican waves going on, and it is a sea of orange. You've got the EDM music blasting as well, Supermax going absolutely ballistic. So clearly Max Verstappen's rather popular around here, and it's not too surprising. I think that wills them on a bit.
That's going to be one song. You get that one song that's stuck in your head in the middle of the night. I'm going to have Supermax stuck in my head tonight, because I walked out of the commentary box and that was just being blared from the grandstands, absolutely singing at the top of their voices. So thanks for that, Dutch fans.
You had Long Run Corner in your head the other day in the lead up, didn't you, to FP2?
I did, and now it's Max, Supermax. But there we go.
The soundtrack to being here in the Netherlands. Look, Alice, what Max Verstappen is doing. I'm almost running out of superlatives, adjectives. He comes into the media pen after a qualifying session, and I just almost don't know what to ask him anymore, because he's just imperious. But yet, even at the beginning of the qualifying session, which I actually said to you guys on air, I mean, that's normally something he says during practice, and I've got no grip, something's wrong with the car. And I thought, hang on a sec, it's coming undone.
We all got our hopes up, didn't we?
Yeah, a little bit. But what he's doing is just phenomenal.
He is absolutely on fire at the moment, isn't he? That car underneath him, he's driving full of confidence, and actually, I think what's making him look even better is not just the fact that he is 6/10 clear of Lando Norris in second place, but the fact that Perez, his teammate, is really struggling. You know, a second off Max once again in qualifying, and he struggled in free practice as well. So that's adding to Max, and Max is probably going, yeah, I'm quite happy, you know.
Do you know what I liked during your commentary, Harry Benjamin? Here's a little compliment from me to you. You said when Sergio Perez finished P7 after qualifying, you said, and that is not what the doctor ordered. I assume you were meaning Dr. Helmut Marko.
Ah, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly
what
what he meant.
I thought, there he goes. Genius.
Yeah. Well, I've seen Dr. Helmut Marko more this weekend than I think I've ever seen him, and he's just sort of wandering around. This paddock is quite an interesting one, the way it's sort of shaped and directed, especially when you're travelling then to the commentary box, sort of parallel or adjacent to the paddock. You've seen Dr. Helmut Marko in a sort of trance as he walks towards the Red Bull Technology Centre. But look, Verstappen, we all thought he was going to get pole from the start of the weekend, really, but it wasn't actually quite as straightforward in the end as we thought it might have been, thanks to the conditions. And as you said, in Q1 he was complaining, and like he would do in a practice session, and the Red Bull looked quite unstable. He had to bail out at one point through turn one, and then coming through the chicane, he also in the early stages the rear looked super unstable at the same time. And he wasn't fastest come the end of Q1. That went to Alex Albon in the Williams in the end, but as the track got drier and drier, and Verstappen got more and more comfortable, it seems the writing was on the wall. We thought maybe Lando Norris and the two McLarens might be able to provide a little bit more of a challenge in qualifying trim. At least it looked closer in practice than it did end up being in qualifying. But I think that scale has been enlarged because of the weather. I don't think the McLarens got the most out of their cars thanks to the conditions.
Yeah, I think Alexander Albon as well has done a really good job in the Williams. I mean, Sargent got through into Q3, but then made that mistake just putting a bit of his wheel on a wet patch of the track and sending it into the wall at turn 2. Driver okay, car not so much, but for Alex to be there in P4, okay, 8/10 off, but only 3/10 off Lando Norris. I think I'm really looking forward to that battle of his second, third, fourth, and Alonso there in fifth. We know what he's like at the start. He's urging himself on and desperate to get another podium.
Yeah, lots of drivers to keep an eye on. It's your job to do that in the commentary box tomorrow, Harry. Have your eyes in all directions. So lots to look out for behind, but it is our pole sitter, Max Verstappen, that I want to hear from next. Yesterday after FP2, he said he was confident of being ahead in qualifying, and, well, there he was, 6/10 up the road. Let's hear from our reigning world champion and current championship leader, Max Verstappen.
Max, congratulations. We heard you on the radio checking the status of the tyres. Was there an element of urgency, panic, or was it just adrenaline running high?
What was that, when we were discussing the slicks?
Yes, whether they were ready.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check that the tyres are ready, because I went out and so it's quite dry, so it could be, let's say, a late call to pit from my side. So I just wanted to double check that everything was ready. But that's how we communicate. It's absolutely fire.
It keeps us entertained anyway, with GP maybe putting you in your place a little sometimes.
Yeah, but that's our relationship, and it works really well for us.
It does seem to be working very well. Just tell me, what are the emotions when you drive around here? Does it make you well up a bit? Are there goosebumps? What is the overall emotion?
I think, qualifying is never that straightforward here. It's quite a difficult track, but then especially with the weather we had. But yeah, to see the crowd supporting you, it always, of course, brings a big smile on my face. But it's all about also then trying to deliver, especially, of course, I know that we have a great car, but to then still do it also with the conditions like today, it's still a great feeling when you do it.
Well done. Good luck tomorrow.
So that was Max Verstappen, who will lead the field away tomorrow afternoon in front of his home crowd, lining up on the front row alongside Lando Norris. And they're sharing the front row for the second time in the last 4 races. That last happened at Silverstone. And Lando Norris, I mean, yesterday, people were getting a little bit excited that perhaps McLaren were going to be the team that could topple Max Verstappen, that could take pole position. Not necessarily the win, but maybe pole. Do you think there was more there for Lando today, Alice?
I think there was. He didn't set a personal best middle sector, and he actually admitted in his post-race interview that it wasn't the car that ran out of talent, it was the driver. Must have made a mistake somewhere along the lap. But looking at the weather tomorrow, it's looking mixed again. You know, heavy showers predicted throughout the day. Whether they will come during the race or before the race, who knows? And I think McLaren looks pretty handy in those wet conditions. And we've seen one small mistake. It's an old school track. You are either in the gravel, game over, or in the barrier as well. And then, so if Max Verstappen just has that little lapse of concentration,
which he's had this weekend. We saw him going over the gravel. Even the champions can do it.
Exactly, and he just managed, very luckily he's going to say it was his skill, saving his car from going into the tyre barrier, the exit of turn 3 during wet conditions as well, running over the mud. You know, if he happens to do that, because he is, believe it or not, everybody, he is human, and we all make mistakes, then who knows, maybe Lando and the McLarens are there to pinch the top spot.
Also, Verstappen doesn't always get the best of starts at a Grand Prix. So Norris could try and, something early doors into turn 1, because the banking that we have here in Zandvoort, Tarzan turn 1, then you've got turn 3, Hugenholtz, it's quite steep and you can take multiple lines. So one driver can have the high line, one can have the low line. And that actually does allow for some good overtaking opportunities. Opportunities like that are limited around this track because it is just a naturally difficult one to overtake on. But when you can do it, you can get some good action side by side going through those cambered corners. So I'm going to have my eyes on Norris to see if he can try and get a wing in front going into turn 1.
Well, actually, Lando was saying to us in the media pen that he's on the preferred side of the track. He likes the side he's going to be lining up on, Alice. How important is the different sides of the track on that starting
Well,
grid?
actually, interestingly here, because I have raced here back in 2020,
Yeah, she has.
2021, I started on that right-hand side and got a fairly good start, but there is a crown in the road on that left-hand side of the grid, and if you just get a little bit of a wheel spin and you drop your wheel over that crown, that can then delay or slow you down getting off the line. So it's hard to see from the TV cameras, but you do get a chance to walk the track. You'll know exactly what I'm on about. So Lando will actually, I understand why he's probably not too bothered that he's starting there on the right-hand side, because there is that crown on the track that if you don't get your start 100% perfect, you can end up making it worse.
I love how you're using the word crown. I'm just thinking of royalty. Queen Alice. There we go. Well, let's hear
That's
from...
a nice sound. I like that.
Maybe that's how we'll refer to her in commentary from now on. Let's hear from Lando Norris then. An interesting race coming up for him tomorrow afternoon. It wasn't the most straightforward qualifying for him, and he was analytical as ever, and I had to pull him up a little bit on his body language because I think P2 was pretty good.
I struggle to sound too excited, but I'm happy. The team's done a very good job. I am super happy with where we are. I don't think we couldn't have got P1 today, even if it was a perfect lap. So, no, it's just as a driver, I'm not. Yeah, I always complain, I guess, not in a bad way, but just I always want things to go well and perfect, and I want it to be perfect. But I'm happy with P2 because we couldn't have done anything more than that. So I'm taking it. Don't worry.
Okay, good. And tomorrow, in terms of the strengths of the car and the opportunities, what are they? Where are they?
The strengths, just the pace is good, but I'll say there's more weaknesses than strengths at the minute, looking ahead to tomorrow. So, we've got Mercedes behind. They're quick. Their race pace is normally always very, very strong. So, we try. We can score some good points. I think we can aim for a podium, and that's our goal.
Turn that frown upside down.
So that was Lando Norris, P2 for him tomorrow, starting on the front row alongside Max Verstappen. And you may think I'm being harsh, pulling him up on his body language and how he's sort of referencing that qualifying session, but ever since I've interviewed Lando back in the F2 days, he's so analytical. He just goes down into the minutiae, and he's just not happy with anything but P1, and he's been trailing behind so much in that McLaren for so long. Suddenly he's in P2, I'm like, just take this as a great moment, like savour it, Alice. But as a racing driver, it's so hard to have that mindset, I imagine.
It's so hard. He's a racing driver, as you said, and once you have that taste of champagne, doesn't matter which step you're standing on the podium, you want more. And obviously I feel that he could sense that something could go amiss for tomorrow, maybe for Max. You know, he seems to be walking around feeling very confident. He knows the car is really good underneath him. And at the same time, their pace in the wet looks pretty strong. And as I said already, we're looking at maybe some mixed conditions tomorrow. So I understand why he's feeling a little bit disappointed.
I think Lando really wants to pounce on the performance of the car as well, because he's kind of been driving, well, has been driving with a bit of a dud car up until Austria, until the upgrades were introduced. And then it's like night and day, where with the car performance being turned around, and then it immediately applied the same to Piastri at the following race in Silverstone. I think Norris is really keen to make sure he is absolutely getting the most out of what he has, because I think he knows how quickly it can flip back again. Because, well, look at the McLaren last year in the fight towards the top of the midfield and towards the top three, and then suddenly in Bahrain they're nowhere. And in this season, look at the likes of Aston Martin perhaps, who took a huge leap and have actually now sort of started to become part of that midfield gaggle rather than sort of second best team. So he knows that competitive order is so tight that he is so harsh on himself that if he's not getting the maximum out of his car, he's kind of ruining the moment for himself.
I reckon if you said to him in Bahrain, hey, you know what, at the Dutch Grand Prix you'll be qualifying second on the grid, I'm sure he would have had a big smile and would have been like, yeah, I will take that. And it's funny how things change throughout a season.
It is very, very funny. So behind Lando Norris, we've got George Russell, P3. So it was McLaren best of the rest this afternoon in Zandvoort in terms of qualifying. And then third place for Mercedes. Yesterday, after FP2, George Russell said there was potential in the car. He thought there was more to come, but actually it wasn't a great day if you looked at the timing sheets. It was Lewis Hamilton who was more buoyed up. He was really firing. It was like, great day. I woke up feeling good. Couldn't wait to get back in the car. And George wasn't really there. So how do you explain a change like that, Alice, do you think, overnight?
Well, conditions played a part for sure, but even in free practice, George was just a little bit behind Hamilton. He ended up outside of the top 10. So, oh no, he didn't. He ended up, second. I got that totally wrong. He struggled yesterday, and he almost didn't. He said, well, we don't really know what's going on. We've got a lot of work to do, but he's sort of been a little bit behind Hamilton recently. Lewis was not happy at all, was he, of the session today. He said he had got stuck in a lot of traffic, but actually I think watching from the sidelines, it didn't look like that was just the case. I just think he didn't hook it up together. But George, you just find that he just quietly sort of chips away. He keeps himself to himself. He works on that, and he is pretty good in these kind of conditions. He's a typical sort of British driver. The most British drivers are fairly decent in the wet because, funny enough, it rains a lot back home.
Yeah. And they're all getting quite a lot of practice this year, I have to say. If you weren't a good driver in the wet before 2023, my goodness me, have you had a chance to hone those skills?
Oh, absolutely. And he put in the performance when he needed to. We talked about this throughout the weekend coverage, actually, and with Andrew Benson as well. George has looked a little bit in trouble the last few races, actually, compared to Lewis. Considering last year very much it was George who had the upper hand, I think, against Hamilton. And in the last couple of races, the gap in qualifying has been a few tenths between them, but that's been quite a lot of positions in this season of Formula One. George has got knocked out in Q1 in Hungary for the first time in his Mercedes career, and it just doesn't seem to his bounce with the car just seems to have gone a bit, and then it seems to go back into Hamilton's favour. But then you have Hamilton dropping out in Q2 here and saying, we thought it was more traffic management, that was the issue, but then him saying, the performance of the car, it's just changing. And I think this car is actually quite unpredictable still, and it, again, to use the same phrase of night and day, it can change from clearly practice to a quali, and that's something he's still getting on top of. It went George's way today.
It certainly did. So P3 for him, he's going to line up on the second row alongside his great mate Alex Albon. Let's hear from the two of them, and then we'll talk about perhaps how we see it all playing out tomorrow afternoon. Let's hear from George and Alex.
George, yesterday you said that there was potential in the car come qualifying. What gave you that optimism?
As I said, just doing the simple things right, I think, so important. Right piece of track. I had the confidence in the car, and it was sort of like a positive snowball effect. And it's something that I've been missing in the previous races. I didn't really have the confidence in the car, nor in myself, to be honest. So, I came into this weekend feeling good, pretty chilled out. Let the team around me do their thing. Let myself just focus on the driving, and the result came.
Of course, you're going to be lining up alongside your, can we call him best friend, do we say, with Alex?
Best friend.
He's just giving you a snarl. When the visor goes down, what happens to the best friend status?
one supervisor goes down. Oh, you're considering us taking against each other tomorrow. We are, mate. What do you mean? I'm like, I think you're going to be the quickest tomorrow. No. I think we'll, give each other respect. And I think, Alex and Williams did an amazing job yesterday, and I'm sure they're going to want to try and seal that P4 or a good position. So, we're all in kind of our own race, but for all of us, if there's an opportunity, we're not going to hold back. Certainly that goes for Alex, I'm sure, as well.
Good luck.
But don't overtake it.
Alex, your best mate, George, said that you thought this weekend was going to be rubbish. Was that what the team were thinking as well? Or is that just your secret little opinion?
I think a goal of ours coming into this weekend was to get out of Q1. I think that's no secret. I was sharing a flight with George on the way there. I think he was with his engineers as well, and I was kind of just joking around with them that if you guys were near us in the grid, you've had a tough weekend. And yet, we're both sharing the grid on the road too, so clearly not true. And in these kind of moments, it feels like you need to reverse engineer the car a little bit, understand why was this so good. The winds has definitely played a part as well. I think the winds, there's been a headwind both days today and tomorrow, which is nice, which has been in the corners where our car's always been struggling with. And then when you have a headwind in these corners, it adds a bit more downforce. It helps hide some of the problems we have. It's helped. So that's the only explanation I have so far.
Okay, so if there's a tailwind tomorrow, you're in a bit of trouble.
We are, but there is.
You already checked the weather vane, the wind vane. Of course, in Formula One, it's always a little bit worrying if you can't pinpoint those issues. So is there a lot of work to do when you leave Zandvoort in readiness for Monza, or is that a track that's already just going to be so easy for you guys?
No, definitely not easy. But I just think we need to understand our operating window at some circuits. For example, here we didn't come into the weekend with much hope, and we've come out of it much stronger than we thought. So looking at competitor analysis, looking how we compare, we need to understand where these performance gains have come from and can we replicate that more consistently throughout the year. That's it really.
And you're nice gentlemen, I know, you and George, but who's got the sharpest elbows, do you think? You're both too nice, I feel.
Yeah, it's true. I think George knows if I get past this, he did it for a long race. So I'm sure he does. Thank you.
Good luck.
So George and Alex being jokey in the media pen, but of course, when those visors come down, all bets are off. But I'm so surprised to see Williams up there, because we've had this before, haven't we? The Williams showing some pace in practice, and then maybe Andrew Benson, our BBC chief F1 writer, sort of saying, calm your phone, get your expectations in order.
Gets his numbers out.
And he's often proved right. Williams aren't necessarily right up there, but Alex just hanging on, P4. So come the race, can he be challenging George? Can he be squabbling for a podium position, or is he going to have the likes of Fernando Alonso behind him in the Aston Martin and even the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz to deal with, making that car as wide as possible?
I really hope so. Alex is full of confidence right now, and it's showing with his results. This shouldn't really be a Williams track, really.
No, it's going to be rubbish, to quote Alex Albon coming into the weekend.
Albon has said that about a few tracks this year. He's like, on paper, this isn't really for us. It doesn't suit our cars. And the thing that suits the Williams cars is straight lines. They've got a Mercedes power unit at the back, and they've got Esteban Ocon just over on the left-hand side as we have a look, enjoying a bit of dinner.
In the Alpine hospitality.
Yes. So
we're not just
randomly sat outside having his dinner.
Thank you, Alpine, again for that. He was saying, I think back in Canada, I think he had more pace than Albon overall, but he just could not get past that Williams on the straight. So then to show this kind of speed in Zandvoort, where it's twisty, it's tight, you're not really going in a straight line for very long at all. So it's clearly a great step in the right direction for Williams, perhaps, but hopefully this isn't just race pace, because they've been fast in practice as well.
Yeah, they have been, but looking at their pace yesterday... Oh,
you're about to bring me right down to
earth. I know, I'm really sorry.
She's not sorry.
He did most of his long run on the medium tyre, did Alex Albon yesterday, and he was a little bit... So his average was a 1 minute 16.9, whereas Norris on the hards was a 1 minute 16.2. Obviously, that was in the dry, so he's a little bit off. Russell as well, he was a few tenths off. Russell was also on the mediums as well. So I think It might be a tough afternoon tomorrow for Alex Albon. He might have to get his elbows out. I mean, it is a hard track to overtake on, so we've seen before that he does a good job when he's got a train of cars behind him of getting his elbows out and timing it to perfection of getting the DRS. So we'll have to see, and again, the weather conditions could play a part in that as well.
While you were saying that, looking out of the window of the Alpine Hospitality, I just saw Alex on his scooter, scooting past. I think, as he said, he's been slightly favoured by the headwind that we've had around the circuit this weekend, and he's already checked the weather. He thinks there's going to be more of the same tomorrow. So hopefully that means he can hang on to a position in the top 10, because that would be a great result for Williams. Right, we will discuss the rest of the drivers after this. So behind Alex Albon, it's the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, then Carlos Sainz, the first Ferrari. In the order, they've had a torrid weekend ahead of Sergio Perez. We've already spoken about that not being an ideal situation for the Mexican driver, whose seat is definitely under some scrutiny still. Oscar Piastri, P8 for him. I think he's disappointed with that one. Ahead of the second Ferrari, Charles Leclerc. Now, every time we cut to the Ferrari of Charles, he was on a little excursion, exploring the track boundaries, the escape roads.
Seeing the sights.
Yeah,
you know,
what was
it's a lovely
going
place.
on? What
There's
was
clearly
going
a lot
on?
to see down at turn 1.
Yeah, you just
I mean,
couldn't
was it
see what he
5 or
was looking
6
for.
times
I lost
he
count.
locked up there? I mean, it's bumpy going down into turn 1, so it's difficult, but clearly
But there's
that
the crown,
Ferrari,
isn't there, of course?
Yeah, it's the crown in the road. You got that right. It's tricky, but actually, I mean, Ferrari probably won't agree with me, but I think it's been not a bad day for them. Okay, Charles has put it in the wall. That is a big disaster. But considering that in free practice 2, none of them in that dry running were in the top 10. And then in the wet conditions that we had in free practice this morning, Sainz was sitting there in 12th and Leclerc was in 9th place. So actually, they've had their best results of the weekend, which, you know, isn't great if you're a Ferrari fan.
Of course, once again, that the radio fired up, we heard Charles kind of coaching the team on how to go about the next part of qualifying.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, schooling was what I was going to
Yeah.
go for. I say coaching. It seems a regular thing, Harry, doesn't it?
I mean, Alice, you put it well. You know, it actually is probably a little bit better than what they were expecting based on practice. But they're Ferrari. You know, 6th place for Sainz and a crash out for Leclerc should not be what the doctor ordered. But with Leclerc's outburst on the radio. And it wasn't an outburst. I think he was absolutely well within his rights, demanding that he made it into Q2 by the skin of his teeth, essentially, because Ferrari left him out there too late to they didn't have a banker lap in, essentially. And so he was on one final lap and had to get it in. And the traffic management was such an issue going into those final double right-hand banked corners. And I think that annoyed Leclerc quite rightly. And he said, look, we just got to focus on this and make sure we get this right, because otherwise we're not going to make it any further in this qualifying. And what was interesting that we picked up in the commentary was that Leclerc doesn't always do that, though. If somebody picks the Ferrari team and wants to coach them, it's usually Carlos Sainz in the races, not Charles Leclerc. So this is actually, I think, a bit of a positive sign. Leclerc is sort of finding it within himself a bit more to say, this is how it should be and this is what should be done. Listen to me and be more of a team leader, actually.
But I think Ferrari have got to really watch out for McLaren. McLaren are 88 points behind them in the Constructors' Championship. And, you know, there's still quite a few races to go. Charles Leclerc is sitting 5th in the drivers, Sainz in 7th, but it's very congested from around about 5th down to, you could even say, include Stroll in that, down in 9th. So Ferrari aren't careful. They're not only going to slip down in the Constructors, but for the drivers as well, they're going to slip further down. So it's not great times for Ferrari at the moment. And I feel like we say that too often.
And what about tomorrow? Because quite a bit of damage on Charles' car. Any risk, do you think, Alice, that he's going to have to do something different with the car and start somewhere else on the grid?
Well, I think he might have escaped any gearbox damage. It looked like, if I remember right, it was more of a front-end impact, so he should be safe for where he's going to start, but at the same time it can get a bit messy at the start here. He's sitting down sort of in that mid-pack, which is not the ideal place to start, especially if it is going to be wet, so he just needs to try and stay out of trouble, and I think he just needs to try and have a clean race, but I can't see it being a good day for Ferrari tomorrow. So I'm very sorry to the Ferrari fans out there.
Well, he'll be starting P9, all being well, and ahead of Logan Sargent, P10. But again, caveat that with... Is there damage to that car? Yeah. It was all going so well. Q3 for Logan. The Williams pace looking good, as we've already spoken about with Alex Albon, his teammate. And then cameras cut to Logan Sargent in the wall. I
was actually gutted for him because the pace of the Williams car has looked great, as we've seen. Albon is proving that. Sargent is a man under pressure for that seat next year. And he has been fast all weekend so long, getting it into Q3 for the first time in his career. And he needed to cement that, and he didn't. And he crumbled under the pressure. There was a mistake, dipped a wheel onto the wet patch and into the wall. And it wasn't just a light touch. It was quite a big touch, front and back, and in fact all four corners really. So that's a big change for Williams to do overnight. I'd be surprised if there wasn't some sort of penalty coming his way for a gearbox change or something for Sargent. We'll wait and see. As of recording, that hasn't been confirmed. But it was the last thing he needed to do. But you say he did have the pace, but he was still consistently about a second off Albon. And I know that might be a little bit exaggerated with the conditions changing sort of lap by lap, but it's all well and good getting into the top 10, but if you're a second off your teammate, Williams need a car cars up in 4th and 5th. They don't need 4th and 10th.
No, exactly.
Sorry, that felt really harsh on Logan. Don't
worry, I'm just going to add insult to injury on this. Of course, it was his team principal, James Vowles, saying that the rate of learning has to increase now, and then this happened.
Positive.
Oh, go on
Positive for Logan. He is the first American to qualify in the top 10 since Michael Andretti at the 1993 Italian Grand Prix.
I'll let you head to
Year
Williams
I was
and tell
born,
him that.
just so you know.
Was it?
Yeah, but you're younger than me, so I don't know why I'm looking at more of Rosanna.
That's more negative news for me, actually, I think.
Right. So I don't remember that.
So Logan Sargent, P10. We're not sure if he'll start there tomorrow afternoon. Ahead of Lance Stroll, P11 in the Aston Martin. Then it was Pierre Gasly, P12. Lewis Hamilton, we've had a chat about. It was traffic that we thought was his main problem today, but I think he thought there was nothing more. And actually, I'm going to quote him. He said to Jenny Gow earlier on, "We won't be winning." Well, from P13, he'd have to work quite hard, I think, on especially this track to make his way up even into the podium positions. But you never know. He was impeded by several drivers. He got a little close to Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, P14 for the Japanese driver. Then Nico Hülkenberg, P15 ahead of Zhou Guanyu. Then Esteban Ocon having a really difficult day today. He was happy with the car yesterday in practice. It all seemed to come undone this afternoon for him. P17 for the French driver. And then Kevin Magnussen, P18 ahead of Valtteri Bottas, P19. And then P20, Liam Lawson, the new guy on the block as of FP3 today. Goodness me, what a baptism of fire. Standing in for Daniel Ricciardo, who had the crash yesterday in FP2. Poor Daniel, a couple of races back in F1, and then he breaks a metacarpal in his hand. That is just the worst luck. I don't know really how to summarise it. I'm sure they will on a particular Netflix documentary at the end of the year. We saw him in his plaster cast, obviously taking no further part in this weekend. And it's Christian Horner saying, Singapore's a target, but my goodness me, that track, Singapore, if you're coming back with a hand injury...
Well, we've seen it from Lance Stroll, haven't we, at the start of the year, and he struggled in Bahrain. And it's safe to say that Singapore is definitely more physical, a lot more turns at Singapore than there is at Bahrain. So I think that is optimistic. But, you know, I'm sure he's got some great physios around him that will be able to nurse him back to full health. But I think if he does take part in the Singapore Grand Prix, I think he's going to be in some pain.
And drivers are just made of something special, aren't they? They seem to heal much quicker than the mere mortals, you and me, Harry, I'm going to have to say, because Alice Powell, obviously driver, and Abby Pulling still here nursing her hot chocolate. You guys, it's gone now.
Can we get a hot chocolate update? It's over and out. Yep.
But they do tend to heal a lot quicker, these drivers, because they are so physically fit and their bodies are so sort of amazingly looked after, I would say.
And he'll be getting the best treatment possible as well. Let's make no bones about that. But Singapore, definitely the target, I think, but we'll see. Monza next weekend, hugely doubtful on that one for sure. So I expect to see Liam Lawson back in for that one. And just to pick up on Lawson, 20th, plumb last, but I think I'm impressed because just to be able to keep that car out of the wall. He hasn't done any dry running
He
ahead
did
of tomorrow.
spin it,
He did spin
didn't
it, but didn't put it in the wall. Didn't hit the wall.
He did a Max Verstappen.
He did spin it, but to have one spin on the high speed final corner in wet and drying conditions for a man that doesn't know that car at all. The last time he was in a AlphaTauri was last year in a free practice session, so it's a completely different car. I think Lawson just to finish the race tomorrow, have a clean race, he would have done a good job.
Yeah,
and I think that's what he's got to aim for.
That's what he needs. He needs to get as much experience and as much track time as possible to because he's going to be racing in Monza, hopefully, if Red Bull don't decide to then get somebody else. We know what they're like. And he might possibly be racing in Singapore, depending on Ricciardo's health. So, yeah, I do expect him to be out of those Grand Prix, and he needs to just stay on track and get race fit, because it's going to be the longest Grand Prix or longest race, I'm sure, in a single seater he's ever done, and he needs to be just a sponge tomorrow and just absorb as much information as possible.
Yes, stay out of trouble at the start, Liam. Hopefully he'll see the checkered flag and he'll be able to go and look through all the data, because we've only got a few days before we then turn around for the Italian Grand Prix. So, wow, poor him. Well, I'm sure he's super excited, but it's a lot to take in, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think you've got to be straight into the debriefs. I'm sure he sat in on them as a reserve driver, but then when you suddenly have to be able to give the feedback and working alongside Yuki, who is now, is the experienced hand in that team, but AlphaTauri going through a bit of a turbulent year. The car's not great. They've got management changes coming in. Obviously, Nick De Vries started the year, then he went, then Ricciardo was back. They thought, okay, great, Ricciardo experience, but he's also getting back up to speed, and then all of this to happen. I think they just need a breather. Let's let Liam get on with his own race in the back and just see what happens. And it's Formula 1. You never know if there's carnage in front of him and he can stay out of it and sweep through. Then the confidence will build quite quickly for Liam.
Certainly will. Well, there you go. We've chatted through the qualifying session here in Zandvoort. Max Verstappen on pole ahead of Lando Norris and George Russell. Lots to look out for tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, Harry Benjamin. Thank you, Alice Powell. Thank you, Abby Pulling, as well.
I'm off to get some hot chocolate.
Yeah, it's good. I recommend.
There we go. She's seen how we do it. Don't tell anyone, Abby, what goes on behind the scenes. We will be live at 1:45 on the BBC. You can join us then. Will Max Verstappen be able to take his third victory in the Netherlands in front of his home crowd? This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.